Ladies and gentlemen, I am Electron. It has been a while since I did a random review, and with Final Fantasy XIV Shadowbringers expansion around the corner, what better review than to do a retrospective review of the current expansion Stormblood. Warning, the following review may contain spoilers. Without a doubt, the developers behind Square Enix Flag MMO, led by Naoki Yoshida, I apologize for the pronunciation, have once again poured their blood, sweat and tears into the expansion and have been closely listening to players. This is something that should be praised, as we are seeing fewer and fewer developers and definitely seeing very few publishers doing this. The expansion brings two new jobs to the fray, Samurai and Red Mage, as well as the first ever limited job, Blue Mage. The Samurai comes off as a middle ground between Monk and Dragoon. Like the Monk, it has multiple rotation paths, each unlocking the next level of the ability Iai Jutsu. I apologize once again for the pronunciation. However, you must go through each path to unlock the third level. Like the Dragoon, the rotation is not restricted by stance. Unfortunately, the Samurai is a little lackluster by not having the raw damage of the Dragoon, nor the buffs or debuffs available to the Monk, but is very forgiving to new players, and in my opinion would be a better job available earlier in the game. The Red Mage is where the development team shows their out-of-the-box thinking. For those not in the know, the Red Mage has always been a midpoint between black and white mages, a jack of all trades so to speak. However, the Red Mage lacks the explosive damage of the Black Mage or healing power of the White Mage. For this reason, Yoshida has been reluctant to release the Red Mage, but knows it to be a Final Fantasy staple job. Final Fantasy veterans with no doubt expected the Red Mage to fall into the DPS role with some healing available, and that is what we got. Except the playstyle was not expected. The Red Mage combines ranged magic attacks with melee, creating a very unique job in the mage roles, as well as being quite versatile. The Blue Mage is the first limited job introduced to the MMO, and what these jobs will do in the future exactly is to be seen. The Blue Mage is unique in the franchise, as it does not learn abilities by leveling up, but from witnessing the ability used in combat and defeating the opponent. In an MMO this is rather difficult, as in some cases certain abilities are needed to complete a dungeon, trial or raid, and should a player lack those abilities, the dungeon will be considered a complete wipe. The current situation of the limited jobs appears to look as though the developers are looking into giving an option for some players to access the game through solo play. However, to access the job you still need to reach level 50, and some of the dungeons to move forward with the job are still in a state that in an unsynced playthrough will not be at a high enough level. This could be in a pseudo development process as the development team figures out how to proceed with limited job. Stormblood saw a large overhaul for the combat and player interface, starting with the removal of the cross-class system. The cross-class system has been replaced with the role action system, which sets aside several abilities that were found on the cross-class system, such as Asuna for healers, and place them in the role action. This has effectively fixed the problem which saw many players having to level up several jobs/classes to obtain required abilities, such as needing to level up Black Mage so that a healer could obtain Swift Cast. Some abilities have not been consolidated, such as Psychic and Cure, to retain a thematic playstyle to the particular job. To further this change, the DPS roles have been divided up into melee, ranged, and mage. The other major combat change that was introduced in the expansion is the condensing of job abilities. Yoshida acknowledged that the hotbards were becoming cluttered with many abilities, especially when some abilities achieve the same thing. As a result, several abilities have been replaced with a later version of itself, such as Rune 1 is replaced with Broil for the Scholar or Rune 4 for the Summoner. Unfortunately, this looks to have limited potential future abilities, however we could see a solid upgrade of already existing abilities. Following on from this, a new combat change is the addition of a gauge bar. This varies for each job, but overall is linked to a certain ability, and certain actions increase the gauge, while some abilities consume it as an alternative resource. Furthermore, the gauge makes many of these actions, such as Aetherflow, easier to monitor. The gauge bar also opens up a wider array of possible combat styles for each current and future jobs. The final major change in combat is the shift on how raid bosses act, in that the bosses are less likely to give a warning to the actions with ground markers and more likely to provide a warning with animation or a soundbite. This is effectively giving more dedicated audiences a tougher challenge and has been met with much praise. From here on there will be spoilers. If you don't mind hearing them, then keep watching. However, if you wish to avoid them, feel free to leave here. Okay, they should have gone now. Stormblood's story is far more brutal and violent than its preceding expansions. However, it also has some of the best character arcs in the entire game. One such character arc is that of Lise. At the beginning, Lise has lost just about everything, and opts to take sides of the Seventh Dawn into the rebellion of the Gur-Arbanians against the Gallian Empire. Lise unexpectedly finds herself confronted by fellow Gur-Arbanians, refusing to fight as they are punished by the Empire for the actions of the Resistance. To make matters worse, the Resistance is attacked shortly after Lise is placed in a leadership position, and struggles to reinvigorate the Resistance morale. Lise's arc develops as she goes to Doma and watches Lord Heian rally the Domans against the Empire. Lise's entire arc sees her fall from grace and rise back up to fight for Gur-Arbania against the Empire. Gosetsu, the stoic samurai introduced at the end of the Heavensward expansion, also sees a strong character arc. Gosetsu sacrifices himself to save the warrior light and Lord Heian. Later he returns with Viceroy Yotsuyu. Yotsuyu, losing her memory, becomes childlike, and Gosetsu dotes on his former enemy. When she regains her memory, Gosetsu is placed with a moral choice of killing her or saving the innocent girl he rescued. In failing to do so, Gosetsu sets off on a pilgrimage across Doma. The central antagonist, Gallian Prince Xenos, has been the game's most terrifying as of yet. While Heavenward's Nidhogg it feels like an ever-present looming threat, the Heavensward story focuses more on the history of the Dragon Song War. Stormblood, however, focuses on this ever-threat of Xenos, with the odd conflict with him, and barely surviving the fight against him. It is hard to see how Yoshida plans to make Shadowbringers have an even larger threat, but seeing as Yoshida is always outdoing himself, it will be a pleasant surprise. Finally, in the main story, Yoshida has placed some more solo elements, with you the player taking control over some of the other characters, particularly in patch updates. This is interesting as we get to see the power behind the Scions for ourselves rather than being told about it. Stormblood's side stories are equally as fun and interesting. The previous 8-man raids have been a fight to stop an Elder Primal, Bahamut and Alexander. This time round we are fighting Omega, an Elder Primal killing machine. Omega places your party against several bosses from previous Final Fantasy titles, as well as using a multitude of unique mechanics. Even Omega itself is a fight worthy of a final boss from a Final Fantasy title, both looking and feeling the part. The side story is a must for Final Fantasy veterans to see how the development team plays these iconic bosses in a pseudo real-time combat style. The Return to Evilus Alliance raid arc has a Final Fantasy Tactics / Final Fantasy XII vibe going, with an ancestral connection similar to that from the Crystal Tower raids. Maybe it is because I haven't finished Final Fantasy XII or any of the Tactics titles, but other than some of the characters looking like they are from those games, there was little to say that this was in reference to them. This was unlike the Crystal Tower raids, in which those who finished Final Fantasy III will recognize each boss. The Four Lords side story is based on the Chinese Guardians, and is an interesting story for each lord. The main thing of note in this story is the mechanics that each child brings to the table. The final story is the one we've all really wanted to hear, is the third adventure of Hildebrand. Once again, he brings a series of hijinks as they search for the wolf burglar, with the grand return of our old friend Greg. Overall, Stormblood has been an exceptional expansion to the MMO. With the capture of the Scions and the still ever threat of the Gallian Empire, Shadowbringers has a great position to launch from. However, the next expansion has a lot to live up to. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications. If not, the dislike button is right over there. I am Electra, and I'll see you next time.